Hey everyone, my name is Muhammad Zavian Adhiyaksa, and this is another episode of Back in My Day podcast solo edition because I'm doing it by myself. So this is also the finals for the Western cultural civilization, and in this video I will be covering certain topics primarily from a video by Philosopheasy called Noam Chomsky, Capitalism, Media Control, and the Illusion of Democracy. So first that I'm going to cover is capitalism, but first I'm going to tell you a little bit about the history of modern capitalism according to a journal by Oxford Review, which I will add right here. So the rise of capitalism starts in the late 18th century to early 19th century, where the emergence of automated machinery and the industry leads to industrial revolution. So how James Watt invented the machines, and that machines spread to Western Europe and the United States and few countries in the Oceania region. And next is how the expansion leads to global expansion. So this expansion starts in the 19th century, driven by trade, colonization, and the technological dominance, and it leads also to certain imperial conquests like the Opium Wars in the China and forced capitalism in other sectors, for example like in Indonesia, I suppose. But then in the 1914 to 1945 it leads to the collapse of the capitalist order by some by some wars called the Great War or the World War I, and the Great Depression and the World War II that shattered the global capitalism. It also leads to the rise of socialist regimes that rejects the idea of capitalism, like the USSR, and that the formation of USSR creates tripartite world. From 1945 to 1980s, where the first world, or the US, Europe, and Japan, are called the democratic capitalism, and the second world is the Soviet bloc, such as the USSR, that primarily ideology is the socialism and communism, and the third world are the post-colonial states attempt to mix in the status models, or like the non-bloc areas or regions such as Indonesia. And then as crisis of state begins to develop, it creates a new rise or the resurgence of global capitalism, because the collapse of the USSR in the Cold War. So it shifts towards a more market-based reforms in China, India, and Eastern Europe, and some structural adjustment post-apartheid in Africa. And in the 1990s until now, this is also covered in Brian Longhurst's Introduction to Cultural Studies, is a theory by Lashan Array called the disorganized capitalism, where certain nations adopt the key features of capitalism, such as private ownership, currency convertibility, trade liberalization, and standardized trade, like the WTO standards. Next, we are going to cover media control according to Noam Chomsky in his book, Media Control. So according to Chomsky, he defines propaganda is to democracy what the bludgeon is to a totalitarian state, and the mass media acts as the primary vehicle to delivering such propaganda, especially in the United States. So he examines in the Woodrow Wilson era how the Creel Commission succeeded within 6 months in turning the pacifist population of United States into a warmongering population. also in George Bush's influence in the war on Iraq. Chomsky examines how the mass media and public relation industries have been used as a sort of a propaganda vehicle to generate public support for, their justification of going to war. He also gives a model to how it works. Chomsky identifies 5 key filters that influence the media content. The first one being ownership, the second one advertising, third one media elite, the fourth is flag, and the common enemy. So the first one, ownership, is how the concentrated media ownership, such as Fox and say the CNN, media ownership in the hands of like few large corporations, often prioritize profit over public interest. The second one being advertising, how those mass media also needs advertising to help them, run their revenue, right? And they still rely on that, so the media outlets are less likely to criticize those advertisers. And the third one being media elite. So how media elite has their own perspective to certain conflicts that sort of narrows down to what media are being presented on those mass medias. The fourth one being flag, how the responses of the population or the viewers respond to media that are being promoted. And because of that, because of the negative response, most mass media would not cover things that will get them flagged. And the fifth one is the common enemy. This is the common strategy used by the George Bush era and a lot of stuff. How identifying a common enemy, such as like terrorism or like foreign powers. This is also, by the way, also used kind of by Donald Trump on making sort of the immigrants as the common enemy. Or in Indonesia, how the President Prabowo is also using antek asing as our common enemy. This is used to unify the public opinion and to justify certain policies, even those that is questionable or even harmful. And next one, we are going to cover certain form or type of propaganda that is also presented in the video. It's called the American Dream propaganda. So, in Noam Chomsky's book called Requiem for American Dream, Noam Chomsky critiques the American Dream as a deceptive ideology that masks deep inequalities and the pursuit of profit over the well-being of the majority. He argues it's a sort of a narrative to use to justify capitalism and maintain the power of the elite, while the traditional idea of the American dream involves upward mobility to a better life. Chomsky sees it as a tool to perpetuate a system where the rich get richer and the poor are left behind with the actual opportunity for most people. So basically, the American dream is a type of propaganda which sort of identifies or says that every people, in American people, has the equal opportunity to become rich or to have a better life if they try hard enough. For example, I'm going to summarize a movie called Pursuit of Happiness, starring Will Smith and also Jaden Smith. So in 1981 for San Francisco, Chris Gardner invested savings in portable bone density scanners, and he was basically poor, and he got divorced, and things are going hard for him. But then he started to pursue a stockbroker internship at the Dean Witter in the Wall Street, and by impressing them with his quick thinking and this managerial skills, he becomes richer, he becomes more successful, and eventually founding his own brokerage firm. This is sort of like a rags to riches sort of story, how every American can also step on the steps of set foot on the steps of Chris Gardner, which is sadly untrue for most people. Alright, next we have propaganda. Propaganda is sort of also another form or type of propaganda or media control. And this is a definition by James Forman Jr. in the New Press. So propaganda, according to James Forman, is a form of propaganda used by police, prosecutors, and media to manipulate public perception of the crime and the criminal justice system. It involves exaggerating the threat of crime, focusing on certain types of crime while ignoring others, and promoting increased funding of police and prisons, even when crime rates are low or stable. Basically, propaganda is a form of propaganda where they make the justice system, they build it as some kind of the righteous institutions that are worthy of appraisal. An example for it is Zootopia. It's an animated movie by Pixar, I believe, where a rabbit, a detective rabbit called Judy Hopps, from Bunnyborough fulfills her dream to become the first rabbit police officer in Zootopia, and on her discovering the truths of Zootopia, he met a fox friend called Nick Wilde, and one thing led to another. She uncovered a conspiracy within the campaign of the mayor, I believe, and by the end, it is presented as like the police or the police institution being a righteous institution that uncovers the discrepancies and the deceptiveness of government, which in reality they rarely do. This is also for me, in my humble opinion, is a form of propaganda. And for the last one, we are going to cover illusion of democracy. This is also based on Noam Chomsky's book, Necessary Illusion. So illusion of democracy refers to the idea that while democratic institutions may exist in a society, the public may not have a genuine control or influence over political decisions, like the concept of the paradox of choice, the illusion of choice. He argues that powerful groups like corporations and wealthy elites can manipulate public opinion and policy outcomes through propaganda and media control, creating a facade and popular sovereignty while actually just serving their own interest. Suggests that the media, often presented a watchdog of democracy, can instead function as a tool to manufacturing consent. There's also another concept which is presented in Noam Chomsky. It frames narrative, selecting which stories to cover, and shaping public discourse. The media can, subtly steer public's opinion to one thing over another, and challenging the established power structures, and in turn create a situation where citizens believe they are participating in a democratic process, but their choices are, limited. For example, how Metro TV is owned by a political party called, I believe, Nasdem, and all of the things that are covered before the election era of 2024, they were supporting Jokowi, but now they were, and against Prabowo, but now they're in for Prabowo, which reflects on Noam Chomsky's idea of media control. Right. In conclusion, from all of the concepts that we have discussed today, from how I can get it, is that, the media has very powerful control over the illusion of democracy and other shapes of media control. But it also opens us to become more critical of the things which are presented. And that's it. Thank you for listening.